What does your child love to do? What is he or she really good at? If you had asked me when my son was 8, I would have immediately said ice hockey. He was not a particularly big, with his skates and his goalie gear on, he looked big and he acted fierce and seasoned in the net. He played like a much older child. But when he took off his mask and helmet and padding, he was just a little boy again. Intellectually gifted children are so advanced in certain aspects of their thinking that we often expect that they'll be brilliant and mature at everything. This is pretty hard to live up to, and it's an expectation that can cause these children and their parents a great deal of misunderstanding and challenge. Today, we're going to explore strategies that parents can use to make life easier for these bright, exceptional children. This is LD Expert Live. At Stowell Learning Centers, we have many gifted students, but because they also have challenges with school, attention, dyslexia, auditory processing, they may not be recognized as being gifted. In fact, the conclusion that some of these students come to is that they're dumb. Today, our guest is going to bring better understanding to gifted or talented but struggling students and how to help them thrive. Welcome to LD Expert Live, your place for answers and solutions for learning differences, dyslexia, and attention challenges. I'm your host, Jill Stowell, founder of Stowell Learning Centers and author of At Wit's End, A Parent's Guide to Ending the Struggle, Tears, and Turmoil of Learning Disabilities. This book will help you understand why some bright children and teens struggle in school and what can be done to change that permanently. To get a free copy, go to parentsatwitsend.com. Let's say hello to Lauren and all of you joining us in the chat.
Hello.
Good morning, Lauren.
Hello. Hello to everyone who is watching us live. Let us know that you're here and where you're checking in from. We love to see all the places where people are tuning in live. Parents, we have a question for you. We would like you to post in the comments something that your child really loves to do. What does your child love to do? I'll talk about my daughter first, Cammie. She's 5. Today is actually her last day of school before summer, and she loves making cards for people. So if it's your birthday, today for her teachers, her last day of school, she made cards. So that's something she loves to do. It brings her joy. It brings everybody else joy. So let us know what your child likes to do. We already have some people checking in. We have Karen, good morning from Sacramento. Thank you. We have Julia checking in from Dallas. Hello, welcome. So again, let us know what your child likes to do. A resource we also have for you is our private Facebook group, Mom Squad. Mom Squad is a community of parents who have kids and teens with learning and attention challenges. We share resources. You can ask questions of other parents who have been through the trenches if you want any insights into your child's needs. So you can find that on our Facebook page or by going to Facebook groups and searching the keywords SLC Mom Squad to request to join. Again, post in the chat what your child loves to do. It looks like some people are already checking in. Kathy is saying, my son loves anything that has to do with building. Oh, we love those 3-dimensional thinkers. And Karen, my 13-year-old loves to edit videos, add music, silly gifs and transitions, etc. So continue to post and we'll check back in a little bit.
Thank you, Lauren. If you're just joining us, this is LD Expert Live. I'm your host, Jill Stowell. Our guest today is Dr. Dan Peters. Dr. Dan is a psychologist in the San Francisco Bay Area, co-founder and executive director of Summit Center, and co-founder of Parent Footprint. He is the author of the Make Your Worrier a Warrior series of books, providing easy to follow practical strategies for both parents and children. Dr. Dan is a frequent speaker and writer on topics related to parenting, family, giftedness, twice exceptionality, dyslexia, and anxiety. He is the host of the Parent Footprint podcast. Welcome, Dr. Dan.
Thanks, Jill. It's great to be here.
It's so nice to have you here too. I always love to hear people's stories. You're clearly very passionate about helping gifted children and their parents. What led you there?
Yeah, isn't it funny how we end up where we end up, and then you look back and it sort of makes sense. So one part of the story is I was at a time in my career that I was transitioning out of the public sector and nonprofit work and community work and loving it, and making a step into the private sector. And in that period, finding a lot of isolation and loneliness, and it wasn't cracked up to what I thought it would be, and really missing all of my people. And I was at this spot where I was searching. I was just like, what should I be doing? And this woman in one of the communities I worked with called me, who happened to be a clinician and a parent of gifted kids. And at that time, she asked me, hey, I've heard that you have been effective with helping the school district understand how anxiety causes behavior. And we are needing a local gifted expert. Do you know anything about giftedness? And I said, I remember all my friends were in those classes. So yes, that's what I know about giftedness. And she said, would you like to get some coffee? And so we had some coffee. She told me about her kids and the struggles that they were having and the dilemma. And then all of a sudden, I started to think about all of my past clientele, all the therapeutic camps I worked at, and all of these kids that had these other labels, but also had these other aspects about them, all these strengths, and they didn't quite fit the diagnostic criteria, as we'd say, or profiles, as the non-gifted or typical kids. She then said, hey, well, we have an expert flying into town from another part of the country. He's an expert in giftedness, and we're looking for a local expert. And I just intuitively said, would you like to train with him? I cleared my practice for a week, and I trained with this guy, Dr. 𝗟𝗏𝗿 in Kentucky, a close friend now, years ago. And everything, I just lit up. And I realized it wasn't only giftedness. There was this other thing, which I later then found out was twice exceptionality. And it changed the way I did work, the way I thought of people. I realized this is a special population, which is not seen. Mm-hmm. And then I know this is a long story, but it just continued here. And then it led to, unbeknownst to me, ending up with 3 kids with this similar profile, which I didn't, they were very young at the time that I entered the field. And then we were living it, and dyslexia is a big thing in our family. And then back in the last part of the story is then my whole world came full circle when I realized that I was also one of these people that had never been diagnosed, but everything all of a sudden made sense for me personally as well.
Isn't that amazing how life just kind of prepares you a little bit at a time for what's coming?
It does.
So let's talk about that term, twice exceptional. Mm-hmm. What does that really mean?
So the way and you did a wonderful job of explaining it in the beginning of the show. The visual that I give people is, imagine the bell curve. So you have this bell curve, and on one side of the bell curve, you have the tail end, which would be people with advanced abilities of any type. And then on the other end of the bell curve, you'd have people who have some challenge areas or some deficits. The term twice exceptionality is when you are exceptional because you're living on both ends of the bell curve. And so you are twice exceptional. You have advanced, could be often cognitive ability, can be academic ability. You could be advanced with creativity, with the performing in visual art or visual arts, or even leadership. And on the other end, you have these challenges, as you mentioned, that your center works so much with, processing issues, learning issues, dyslexia, dysgraphia, auditory processing, visual processing, autism spectrum, dysgraphia. I mean, the list goes on. And the other thing I'll say is, the field is even, so twice exceptional, or 2E, is what's the mainstream term. And the field is even moving beyond to the idea of multi-exceptional or thrice exceptional, because so many of these kids, it's not just one thing on each side. These kids are complex.
Right, right. So, and now there's this term asynchronous development, or really targeting that uneven development of these gifted kids.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us some examples of what that looks like?
Yeah, and this is a really good question, and it's not always a clean answer. So the fancy term, as you said, is asynchronous development or developmental asynchrony. I like to call it uneven development, as you said. It makes a lot of sense that way. And so when we think about with gifted individuals alone, it's not common that someone is at the advanced levels across all areas of intellectual, social, emotional, academic, developmental functioning. I mean, those people do exist, but that's not the norm in the giftedness. You usually have asynchrony or uneven development. So you have the 10-year-old that has the math skills of a 12-year-old, the science skills of a 15-year-old, the handwriting of an 8-year-old, and the social emotional regulation of a 5-year-old. Right. So this is all this and it's like, what's coming at you at what time? Well, in English class, you're getting sloppy handwriting and someone who doesn't like to write. You're getting a high level math, and you actually are maybe debating with someone who you are wondering what you were even debating about because they're so advanced in their debating skills. So that's all this asynchrony. Mm-hmm. Now, people always say, well, what's the difference between asynchrony or uneven development and then twice exceptionality? Because if we don't expect everyone to be, quote, typical in their development or even in their development, when does it become an actual deficit or a disorder? And this is something also we care deeply about at our center. We're very strength-based, and something that happened with the DSM-5, the last diagnostic manual, was that one of the criticisms is that all human variability is being put into a pathological diagnosis, a diagnostic category. And so being mindful of that, we want to try to capture what is a weakness and what's actually something that's diagnosable. Now, anyone who has a weakness, diagnosable or not, often benefits from very similar intervention. That being said, going back to your original question, with asynchrony, when the asynchrony has a large gap and causes significant functional or life challenge or impairment, that's when it goes into twice exceptionality. That's when it goes into, okay, we are dealing with, someone has executive functioning weaknesses. Well, this person has significant attentional and executive functioning weaknesses, which seems to meet criteria for ADHD. So now they're twice exceptional, as opposed to someone who often gifted individuals have executive functioning challenges. So we are always trying to assess, like, what's a weakness and what's an actual other exceptionality, which would then warrant a diagnosis, an intervention plan, and the label of twice exceptionality.
Wow, that really makes a lot of sense, and something that's probably can be kind of a fine line sometimes.
For sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So what are some common characteristics of 2E children that a parent might notice?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, just continuing with the developmental asynchrony, you have these large discrepancies in abilities. So in some areas of life, there is advanced thinking, there's advanced verbal ability, there's advanced academics, reading early and on their own, loving and being really good at math, understanding science and nature at a very high level at a young age, a very advanced athlete, artist, high creativity, thinking outside the box, as a lot of these twice exceptional folks do. And so you have these abilities that are beyond what is expected. For firstborns, people don't notice it as much until a secondborn comes along, or you're with other kids in the community and you're like, oh, your kid's not doing that? Oh, my kid's doing that. So there's these advanced abilities. There's also advanced sense of humor and understanding of nuances, another characteristic of a lot of gifted individuals. And then there's also these areas that are really challenging. So for a lot of these kids have sensory processing issues, that when you flush the toilet, they start to cry. When people boom out happy birthday at a home party or at another party at a restaurant, they're overwhelmed. The loud sounds and the sirens, bright lights, textures. They don't like certain foods, fine motor challenges, can't button, have trouble using utensils, trouble tying their shoes. So we see a lot of sensory processing issues. As I mentioned, you could see some pretty significant executive functioning issues, kind of the absent-minded professor sort of profile, we like to say in a kind way. And also, again, advanced reasoning, and then you can't read their handwriting, or they're not spelling, or they're not reading. They're memorizing, or they're making it up, or having difficulty remembering math facts, not understanding social communication. So there's a host of these, again, deficits that you'd see. It's like, and then as time goes on, it's these deficits are causing problems in their life, whether it's at home, whether it's social, or whether it's at school.
That's really helpful. I was, when you were talking about the child who, memorizes, but they're not really reading. We see that a lot. Parents don't realize that their kids have a reading problem. Teachers don't realize that there's a reading problem for years sometimes, because they're so good at covering it up and figuring out how to get by.
I have a quick story for you, a personal story related to this, because this is the first time I remember cheating, and because of this. And I also like to tell parents, like, when kids with learning issues cheat, it's not because they're cheaters, it's because they're overwhelmed. Like, this is the first assumption we need to make, and we need to help them. And so the story, again, my life makes more sense academically looking back. Third grade, I think, was the first time we had to do a book report from chapter books picked out from the library, and now smaller print, no pictures, which I really liked reading with pictures and drawing pictures. And I remember, like it was yesterday, I picked out my robot buddy because it had a really cool cover picture, and it just sounded cool. I was into robots. And so all of a sudden, like 3 days before, I kept trying to read it at night, and I'd read, it was so slow for me to read, and I would put it down. And then I remember my teacher saying, okay, it's, Danny, it's your turn on Friday or something. I had like 3 days. I'm like, okay, I'm going to read. I'm going to read tonight. I'm going to read a lot tonight. I'm going to read a lot tomorrow. And then I'm going to have my oral book report. And I tried every night. I couldn't do it. I didn't know what to do. I remember thinking I should tell my mom, but I'm like, no, I don't know why, but I didn't. And I didn't know what I was going to do. Talk about worry monster that night before. And I was definitely a pleaser, rule follower kind of guy. And I get called up, still not knowing what I'm going to do. And I remember standing in front of the class, teacher off to the side. And I proceeded to make up what that book was about. And then I see everyone smiling and really engaged. And then halfway through, I realized, oh my gosh, this is not a huge school. This is not a huge library. What happens if someone's read it, or my teacher's read it, and they know I just made the whole thing up? And so I did that. And then I remember being anxious and worried for probably about 2 weeks that I was going to get caught for cheating. And none of it happened. But again, in hindsight, it all makes sense when you have these underlying issues that you're not supposed to have, or you don't understand, and how you just try to be resourceful and figure out a way, which in this case wasn't an honest way. Anyways, still, it's. I
think that's such a great example of what our kids do, and I love that that you use the word resourceful, because they really are. They figure out how to manage, and so I think it's really important for us as parents and teachers to. I mean, of course, we need to address the underlying issues that are causing the challenge, but to recognize what it is versus, oh, he's just trying to cheat.
Yeah.
So, I mean, because, I don't know. It's not always obvious,
Right. Right.
uh, but I can imagine so many of our students could stand up there and be great storytellers and really sell it. So good job.
Thank you.
I was a teacher for gifted students way back when the designation was changed from MGM, mentally gifted minor, to GATE, or gifted and talented education, which kind of recognized then that it's not just cognitive or academic ability.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it could be other things.
Mm-hmm. And this brings up a lot of ideas for me. So one is, I think it was 1972, there was the Maryland report, and it was a federal study to look at, and this might have been the time when that name was changed. And they looked at the areas of giftedness, and it was cognitive, it was academic, it was the visual arts, the performing arts and leadership, and it was athletic ability. And what is fascinating about this is once they looked at all of that, they took out athletic giftedness because they determined it already had the best program. Because think about when you have someone who is athletically talented and gifted, they always generally end up on the best teams with the best coaches and with resources given to them, either by the family who has it or others who support it. And then they're nurtured to be their best. And it's interesting that the committee realized and it still is the best training program we have for gifted individuals. And so they took it away. So that's one thing. The other thing that makes me think about what you're saying, Jill, is there's a debate within the field of gifted and talented and how we look at that. I think the intention was, which I agree with the intention, is you have giftedness. And giftedness is usually these advanced abilities, this advanced potential. And then you have talent, which is thought of as the expression of those abilities. There's been times in the field, and this is where the split within the gifted field is, that people were focusing on talent. And what was happening was, to those of us in the twice exceptional world, it felt like it was leaving the twice exceptional kids behind, because so often these twice exceptional kids have all of this cognitive potential. They have all of this creativity and all this visual spatial strength, but it's not showing up in the classroom in any way. And so therefore, if programs are only to support talent development, we have to make sure we're also nurturing and identifying the kids who are twice exceptional. They have all this cognitive potential, and our goal is to help them develop it in a way where they can use it and do something with it.
That brings me to another thought, because I feel like special needs kids, the special needs of these gifted and talented children, are not really well understood in the schools. And so ideally, what would a plan for a gifted student include?
Well, yeah, so perfect world. And in some states, giftedness in California, for example, giftedness years ago stopped being a mandate. Like, you don't have to have gifted programs. You don't have to identify giftedness. And there are a lot of districts that don't. Some for, equality and equity reasons, which understandable in intention, but ends up being a non-equity situation. So basically, there are states that actually have gifted mandates, and in some states, the giftedness is the gifted programs are connected within the special education departments. And there are some states that have districts that every gifted student has a gifted plan. They also then, if they're twice exceptional, they have a gifted plan and they have a special education plan that is molded together. So best practices for giftedness is for students to be able to be taught at the level that they are for each subject. Now, of course, easy for me to say as a non-school administrator and as a
Right.
non-teacher, right? So I want to be very clear. This is not easy to do, but it is done. It is done a lot. So the idea is, again, if I am a 5th grader and my writing is 5th grade, but my handwriting is 3rd grade, and my math is 7th grade, and my science is 10th grade, I'm getting instruction in at those levels with, and being able to get some partial acceleration. Or there's a newer term. I have a colleague, Dina Bruyas, who wrote a book on cluster grouping, where it's a research-based program where when you cluster kids in the advanced, the above average, and this isn't tracking because tracking is no good, but if you have these fluid groups, it showed that across socioeconomic status and ethnicity, everyone's performance in those groups went up because of how they were grouped. So ideally, you're with other like-minded kids doing work at the level that you are able to perform, because, with zone of proximal development, Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, we want to just stretch these kids so they grow, not have learned helplessness because it's too much, and not never learn how to stretch because we don't have any expectations for them. Mm-hmm. Now, all we're adding for, not all, but I mean, it's critical. What we're adding for twice exceptional students is we're adding the accommodation. So those really bright kids down the road can be in AP classes what they're intellectually should be in, but they can't read the quantity of books in the time that's allotted. They can't do the writing in the time that's allotted. Like, how do we give them more time? Give them the ability to show what they know verbally, being able to use audiobooks. So ideally for a twice exceptional student, you have the acceleration plan and differentiation plan, but then you also have the accommodation plan as well.
Mm-hmm. That's really helpful. Challenging, I know, in a school setting, but it's a good thing for a parent to have that picture as you are trying to, help form that plan for your child. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure listening to you has got to be such a relief for parents, just to know that they and their children are understood. So thank you for all of that. This is LD Expert Live. I'm Jill Stowell. We're talking with Dr. Dan Peters, psychologist, author, and co-founder of Summit Center, about gifted, struggling students. Stick with us because we're going to talk about specific ways to support these incredible kids. But first, let's check back in with Lauren and our viewers. And hey, everybody, I hope you've been posting what your child loves to do or what they're really good at, because I'm just so anxious to hear.
These are fun. Yes. So we have Julia saying her 11-year-old son loves dinosaurs, building and making stop motion videos. That seems to be really popular with our kiddos. They're really good at it. I've seen some really good stop motion videos from some of our students, and they are really good. And the time and the patience it takes to move the little, usually they use Legos or something like that. It's amazing what our kids have been able to do. So that's really fun. We have a couple of questions from Christian. It sounds like he is an international viewer. So I'm gonna post each one. First question is, what can I do if the school of my diagnosed 𝗂𝗲 child is focusing only on his learning disabilities?
Yeah, Christian. So that's very common. I mean, unfortunately, this is the norm in the big picture of things. And so a few things. One is inside and outside. So inside the school is, I always try to join the school where they are and know what their job is and what they feel their job is. And then try to brainstorm with them any ways there can be some strength-based partial acceleration, differentiation, interest, or enrichment focused activity. Because if you have a child who is strong in one area, it's again, sometimes it's just thinking outside the box. So when can they, is there any group of kids who have these same abilities that there can be some extended research or activities with? Is there any opportunity to go up a grade a couple times a week in science, for example? So you're just trying to work with them to think outside the box. That's within the school. Outside is you're doing all you can to support those advanced abilities and strengths without adding more work. Because a lot of time kids are like, okay, yeah, I love math and I have to do boring math at school, and now you're making me do hard math outside of school. Some of these kids love math and will say, yeah, let's sign me up. But you just have to be aware of what would be enrichment outside of school so they're still getting those strengths met. And the other thing that I would say is what's key for everyone listening with a twice exceptional child is to explain to your child in the way that feels comfortable their profile. That there is a thing called twice exceptionality where they have both advanced abilities and they have abilities that are harder for them, or they have these, they're slower to develop, or these weaknesses. As Jill said at the top of the show, a lot of these kids feel dumb. And what happens is with school, twice exceptional learners don't know the difference between intelligence and academics. So we want to decouple those for them so they start to get a healthy self-concept about they're really strong in these areas and these areas are more difficult.
That is great advice. I just have found that when kids really have a better understanding of themselves and what they're dealing with, it's just a whole different world for them. They can be a part of figuring out what they need, and they are so much more confident in who they are when they can understand Absolutely. And talk about about it.
Piggybacking off of that question in regards to the school kind of only focusing on the learning issues, Christian's also asking, what if the country you live in has no program for gifted children? So internationally, are you familiar with resources for an international community?
There is an international community. I would, so one community that I would like to tell everyone about is a community called Bright Quirky. And a colleague of mine, Debbie Steinberg-Kuntz, is the founder of that. And there are people all over the world. I get to participate once a month on a Q&A with a colleague who's an educator and answer all of these wonderful same type questions. And so this is a community that it is for a small monthly fee. You get inside the community, but they also, just by looking at the website, they have a host. They have a lot of information and a lot of talks over the last summits that you can also view. I think you have to purchase, but there is a larger community out there, and a lot of people are being really creative for all of those reasons, because a lot of countries do not have gifted programs. And I also want to tell people from these countries, here we are, we're in California, which is supposed to be a very progressive state, and there's a lot of times that our country here in this little sliver doesn't have much either, so we have to be really creative.
Right. Yeah, we find that all the time, both with the gifted population and with kids with learning disabilities. I mean, it just kind of varies, where you live. That's part of the beauty of remote learning, is that we can access more of this population than we ever could before.
Let me say one other resource, 𝗟𝗲𝗿, supporting the emotional needs of the gifted. That is an international group as well. And there's also now a 𝗟𝗍 Europe group that you could look up separately as well.
Okay, great. And I think we'll try to post some of those links in the chat for the viewers. Christian is adding to the conversation, my child is so bored in school that I hired a private science teacher once a week, but he cries every evening about having to go to school. So we do hear that a lot, that, these kids just, the love of learning is gone. Yeah. And then he has a specific, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just saw Maureen Neinhardt. So one thing to add, again, just to kind of bust this open as well, there's another organization that's called Gifted Homeschoolers, and it's not just for homeschoolers, but you will find for the kids that are languishing in school. And again, every country does these things differently, but there is a vibrant homeschooling, hybrid homeschooling community. There were a lot of resources before COVID. Now with COVID, the amount of online schooling and resources and communities has just blown up. And what I liken it to is, imagine you as an adult. Most of us adults have had some experience with having a job we didn't like, and I'm just using my words kindly here, like a job we didn't like, and we started to languish, and we started to not want to go to work, and we started to feel depressed, and we started to feel anxious, and we started to feel anywhere from anxious to dead inside, numb, and feel powerless. These are how these kids often feel. And I want to give like permission and courage to start looking if there are ways to be creative, because there's this idea in education that you have, which is slowly changing, that you have to go through the system stepwise to come out the other side to be successful. And for some of these kids, that system actually is the reason they're not ultimately successful, because they feel so terrible about themselves. They don't even like to learn anymore, and they're not really sure what this whole thing is about. So I just want to encourage everyone to try to think outside the box and see like how are ways to mix it up a little bit if your kids are really struggling because of boredom or their needs not being met.
Absolutely. Yes. So Christian also is asking about Maureen, is it 𝗍𝗫𝗏?
Yes.
Is considering treating giftedness in the talent development way so that kids don't get sorted. What are your thoughts on that?
So Maureen 𝗍𝗫𝗏 is an amazing person in the field and international. I don't entirely understand the question about how they don't get sorted. I think that means we don't want kids. Here's how an interpretation, which might be incorrect, but we don't want kids to be sorted between, okay, here are kids that are performing at a high level, and here are bright kids who aren't performing, so we're just going to separate them. Because actually, all of these kids can learn from each other and actually benefit each other. So yeah, I do not agree with sorting, if that's the right term, or separating them. We will need to have programs that understand the twice exceptionality, and our goal is to create talent out of these amazing abilities that they have.
That makes sense. Christian is adding to the conversation. Unfortunately, they don't allow homeschooling in Switzerland, where he is from. Have the issue you mentioned before. He has the issue you mentioned before. After school, he's just done. Totally. So definitely, Christian, check out those resources when we posted some of the links to both Bright and Quirky and Sang. So check those out. And he says, thanks for all the tips.
I think that's one thing that I've heard that's not great about Switzerland. Everything else sounds phenomenal about Switzerland.
Definitely. We have Laura or Lara. My 11-year-old is brilliant, but it doesn't show up in the classroom in any way, with the exception that his verbal abilities are obvious. He's in advanced academics program, but I don't see it bringing out his abilities. His motivation level is so low, and that is something we hear all the time. Can you elaborate on kind of the link between giftedness or this twice exceptional population and that low motivation? Yeah,
so there's, I guess, a couple hypotheses here. First of all, big picture, gifted individuals are generally internally motivated, intrinsically motivated. It's what comes from them. Unless you are a high, like one of these high achieving, perfectionistic people, those folks do tend to be motivated by awards and grades and acknowledgement. But a lot of these kids are intrinsically motivated. And so for them, a lot of school is completely meaningless, doesn't make sense. It's repetitive, it's rote, and there's just mundane and boring. If that's the case, and there's two hypotheses. There are some kids that are just not school performers. They're thinkers. And those kids have low motivation for school that is not engaging, even if they don't have another exceptionality. They just are not into it. They're like, this is a waste of time. This doesn't make sense. I got it the first time. Now I have to do it for 5 days and like 20 of these things a day. So that's one hypothesis. The other hypothesis, when you have someone who's not motivated, doesn't like going, is not performing to their verbal ability potential, is another exceptionality that's in there. There's something called stealth dyslexia, for example, which is something that I would have described to be, is, On tests, I could read well enough, I could write well enough, but it was so below my other abilities and so hard and laborious for me. Nowadays, when we test at our center, like that discrepancy between intellectual ability and other abilities, it's still an issue. Like you can be in the average range and still have a learning disability. So with the kids that are, I often want to dig deeper and find out, what is going on. And that often can be from maybe having them have, an interview with someone, an educator, psychologist in the field, the gifted 𝗂𝗍 field, which could potentially lead to some testing if there is something that needs to be uncovered.
Right. And we see that all the time, don't we, Jill, where the child might not qualify for an IEP or
Right.
have a diagnosable learning disability, but there truly is a learning issue. Because the discrepancy, all the other tests or a lot of other tests, they're in the 99th percentile plus.
Mm-hmm.
And then for auditory processing or, those types of auditory activities, maybe 16th percentile. And so the school will say there's not an issue. And for that child, it absolutely is a true weakness. So yeah, we see that all the time.
Yeah, and just listening to you, Dr. Dan, I mean, I'm just so grateful for everything you're sharing because, it just makes us recognize there's such a need for educators and, parents and just all of us, about not every child is the same. And it's really time that we take a look at these differences and needs and just how amazing our kids are, but we need to approach them differently. We just need to approach with a better understanding. So I appreciate everything that you're sharing.
Absolutely. One more question before we get into specific ways to support these kiddos. We have Robin asking suggestions for 𝗂𝗍 kids that are graduating high school as specific colleges or to do a gap year programs. Do you have any advice for kids that are graduating?
Yes, having 2 now of our own in college, we've gone through that process. And what we've learned personally and also through all my clients is, so you meet one 𝗂𝗍 kid, you've met one 𝗂𝗍 kid, right? Like everyone's profile is so different. And so it's really trying to figure out what do we imagine? And this is, of course, in concert and in collaboration with your child. First of all, where do they want to be? Like, this is how my understanding. Okay, so let me back up. Out of Challenge Success, which is out of Stanford's graduate program in education, there's a white paper that came out maybe 2 years ago now or less about college fit. It's this huge study done by Gallup, and basically it's all about what creates success is the fit of college. It's not the name of the college. It's not the prestige of the college. It's the fit between the experience. And when you look at it, it's where is it in the country? Is it rural? Is it urban? Is it large? Is it small? Is it hands-on? Is it, what are the extracurricular activities? What are the volunteer, international? So you really want to look at your child with them and think like, what seems to fit correctly? Then there is a book that is, I will not remember the title, but I know you guys are great at looking it up. And it's a fat book of colleges, like for kids with learning disabilities or learning differences. And it is huge. And it talks about all the different schools that have all of these different departments. Having gone to a lot of schools, I can tell you, when you go and visit, if you are able to go and visit the schools, you can, and big or small, you can tell the schools that really invest in their learning programs, partly by the name. You have larger schools that still call them Office of Disability Services. What person wants to go there regularly? Then you have other schools that call it the Center for Educational Advancement or Academic Excellence. Like there's these other names that you could tell they're totally part of the experience, they make it very strength-based. And so you can really get a feel. And then also there are some college counselors, if you are able to go that route and want to go that route that do specialize with kids that have learning differences, because this is such a big, it's a big market. It's a big need. And then within those, there are those college counselors that understand twice exceptionality.
That's a great tip. Thank you so much for sharing that. That feels like a pro tip to look out for those services in colleges. Parents, keep posting questions and comments. I want to make sure that we get to how to support these twice exceptional kids. Keep posting. Let us know what your kids love to do, what your child loves to do, and we'll check back in towards the end of the show.
Great. Thank you, Lauren. So I've heard you say, Dr. Dan, that gifted kids are gifted all of the time. And people might think, well, of course they are. But I think it's easy to miss the importance of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. As I was hearing you say it, one way they're gifted all the time. Now, a lot of these parents and teachers will say, they're not acting gifted all the time. And that's to be fair, right? They're humans. And I guess that's something to say, is the expectation we place on gifted students to be these special, amazing people all the time. And that's not what we want to do. But to your point, Jill, that statement, gifted kids are gifted all the time, is like, this is part, and you know what I didn't say? Giftedness, that term is a tough term, and the field has tried to come up with different terms that don't sound so entitled, so special. I just want to say that most of us agree that term doesn't always describe what we want to describe, and in fact, it sometimes pushes people away, whether it's advanced development, accelerated, whatever. The idea that gifted students are gifted all the time is that they're not just gifted on Wednesdays from 3 to 4 when they get to do a solar baking class. And that's what a lot of times when people are thinking about, well, I do give them enrichment, or we are giving them enrichment, or they can attend this program or this activity, that's not meeting their whole needs, because they are who they are all the time. And something that I didn't say in one of the previous questions you asked is, what we often see with these folks are intensity. And so there's the trifecta: very bright, very intense, and very sensitive. And that is all the time. And sometimes you get the intense one, sometimes you get the sensitive one, sometimes you're just seeing the very bright, and a lot you're seeing all of it at once, which can be quite overwhelming for parents, particularly when our kids are young. But that's this profile, and that's who they are every time they walk into a room, which is why we just have to, again, you can't differentiate their entire life, but it's about really being aware of, this is who they are, and this is what drives them, and this is what they're always responding to in all environments.
You know, these kids are twice exceptional kids in particular are really complex. What guidance do you have for parents?
As I'm taking a deep breath, that's my first suggestion, is to you got to breathe deeply, and I feel there's a lot of compassion that goes into this, and patience. And it's compassion and patience for yourself as a parent, because as my wife and I can attest to, there are joys, lots of looking back at joys, and lots of looking back at some pretty challenging times because of the intensity and sensitivity. And also a lot of kind of like, what are we doing wrong? Or why can't we have a quiet family dinner? And why is, someone always glued to someone and not wanting to be separated? And part of it is, again, to have this kind of space and this compassion for, you're doing the best you can as a parent, and your child is just being who he or she is. And I feel like 50% of this package, this journey, is trying to understand who the person is in the situation that you're in. And then it's to that next step is, okay, what are the exceptionalities that are causing the intensity? Is it sensory processing? Is it anxiety? Is it a learning issue? Is it a processing issue? So to try to understand, like, what is it that is triggering our child, and what is it, the reason they're struggling, and what environments are seemingly good for them, and what environments are really terrible and stressful for them. And from there, it's trying to, with these complex profiles, kind of go to the low-hanging fruit. One area of low-hanging fruit is, what are their strengths? What do they love? When are they at their best? And support that and nurture that. And the other area is, all right, where are they struggling? Where are they needing some academic or some skill development, social, occupational therapy, academic? And how do we find a way to communicate who they are to the people in their lives so they're understood better? And, you know, for those of you listening, a lot of the time it could be grandparents. That is kind of hard too, because of course they're the most loving, but they're also like, hey, you need to be doing this differently with your kids, and you're letting them walk all over you. And you know that that approach is not going to work well with them, and it might not have worked well with you when you were growing up. And then it's trying to explain them also to the teacher and work with the school, whether it's a 504 or an IEP, to try to put together an environment where they're not triggered in negative ways and is supporting their growth. Mm-hmm. Right. I just said a lot. That was a lot of stuff there. Yeah.
Great stuff though. And then you had mentioned earlier, just really helping our kids to understand themselves and have an accurate perception and view of themselves. You know, it's so hard when a child is really brilliant and they're constantly being told, well, you're so smart. Well, you're so smart. And then, you know, we see that backfire on kids sometimes. They think, well, then I'm afraid to try anything, because what if I can't do it? And then people won't think I'm smart. And so any other pieces of advice for parents in terms of, you know, just how to support their kids?
I have. So something that is coming to me is the difference between what your child should be able to do at this age versus what they can do. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell another story about, we have girl, boy, girl. So with my son, and this is the thing, I get to, you know, give all this consultation during the day. And then I used to get to go home and live it. And then at times realize, like, well, you just listen to yourself of what you're saying and like do it at home, right? Like it's not always easy. Right. And so I remember executive functioning. So getting out the house in elementary school with at one for a couple years, 3 kids, and then a few years, 2 kids. It was always rough because of executive functioning challenges and morning challenges. And, you know, they had this expectation that at 4th grade, that my son should be able to go into his room, get his clothes on, bring his backpack, and like, let's get out the door. And he wasn't able to, because he had less developed executive functioning. And if I changed it to, well, it doesn't matter what he's supposed to, where is he? And I started to do what I would tell my clients to do. I'm like, hey, bud, let's go to your room. And while he's in there telling me about his latest Lego creation and his latest idea and invention, I'm like, yeah, okay, let's get that sock on. Okay, here's this sock. All right, let's get those shoes. All right, come on, and he's talking. And then, okay, let's go brush our teeth. And when I was able to meet him where he was and not where I thought he should be or where I wanted him to be, we had much better mornings. So that's one thing, is to just kind of to really look into where your child is at. Again, both of the strengths and where they need that differentiation, but also in the challenge areas. The other thing I'll say for twice exceptional kids, like the gift, and this is also, you know, for many of our kids with learning differences, time. They process slower and more deeply. And we are on this fast pace, over-scheduled, time pressured society, school, tests. And these kids, they don't do well with that. So the more time you can build in your day for transitioning, for completing tasks, objects, fun or not fun, I think you'll find there's much more joy and less meltdowns and tough stuff.
Wow, that's great advice. Thank you. If you're just joining us, this is LD Expert Live. We're talking with Dr. Dan Peters about how to support your twice exceptional learner. Let's check back in with Lauren and our viewers.
Hello. So our parents are really everything's really resonating with them, especially this theme of needing some change or some education on the part of the schools or the educators. Karen is chiming in, it is absolutely time to find ways to support kids so that they feel successful and included in classrooms. Many teachers want to be educated, but don't know how, and that is true. Having been a teacher, former teacher myself, and also working with a number of teachers. And when they receive training, they don't have a support system to execute what they've learned. A lot of times it's just, they had one seminar, they had one kind of, professional development course, and then don't know what to do with it. And then we have Susan saying she recently learned during a special education report from our school district that the California Department of Education only expects and requires 15% proficiency level of special ed students by a district. This is why schools believe they only have to teach to meet 15% proficiency from their special ed kids, why they refuse to provide accommodations, and why the system must change. And I believe, just to clarify, just again, having been in the system as a teacher myself, the way that I understood it when I was a teacher wasn't necessarily that the child only needs to be 15% proficient, it's that the entire population of those kids on IEPs, or that population of special education students, needed to achieve, 15% of them needed to score proficient on state testing, is the way that it was, at least when I was a teacher, but that was over 10 years ago. I was last in the classroom in 2010 during No Child Left Behind, but it categorized kids, and that's where a lot of times the school district put their emphasis is on the category of students and teaching to the test, which I know does not serve these kids well, because they're basically just, trying to cram knowledge so that they can do well on this official test so that the district can stay within their numbers. So I know that that's where a lot of frustration comes from parents. We have further questions. We have Laura. My son is heading into middle school. Where can I find the appropriate assistance or testing to uncover anything that would be helpful? He's reluctant to take advanced classes because his motivation is low, but I don't want to create a gap for later. He's unusual and quirky, and I want him to be around kids as similar as possible.
Yes. Well, in terms of there's lots of psychologists, neuropsychologists, and centers that test, that do this sort of what we call neuropsychological or often neuroeducational testing, or as another level of testing. That's something we do at Summit Center, and I know that you guys have tons of resources as well. I highly recommend, if you have a bright and quirky or twice exceptional child, you have someone test who understands this profile, works with this profile. It is a costly endeavor, it's a time-consuming endeavor, and it's something you're going to want to do as few times as possible and really be meaningful. So strongly suggest you work with someone that way. And then it's looking for the pockets where there are these kids. And sometimes you can get it in school if there is a charter school or a private school, or you happen to have a district with some gifted classrooms, self-contained gifted classrooms. Other times you might be finding it online, or you find their people, and this is outside of school, but in their interest area, Dungeons and Dragons, other robotics, first Lego League, Odyssey of the Mind, or these other groups where you get these other bright, creative kids together.
Absolutely. And Christian is asking about the services from Summit Center. Can the Summit Center offer online summer camps for the twice exceptional population in the future? Is that something that you guys offer there?
So we actually, related to us, we have had a 1-week summer camp. It's called Camp Summit, but it's in person in Northern California. Unfortunately, this is the second year we've had to cancel it due to COVID. We had an 11-year run, and it's going to be back in 2022. There has been talk of trying to figure out virtual camps, and we have not gotten there yet. But I know if you just keep looking in gifted summer camps, you will. This world is not huge, there's more and more out there now that your kids can. Especially, there's a lot of groups that are doing things virtually.
Mhm. We know we're affiliated down here in Southern California, a group, IEA, Institute for Educational Advancement,
Yep.
has a number of online classes, and they work. We've shared students that have been in other parts of the country, so they have not been local to Southern California. So we had their founder on a previous broadcast, Betsy. And so, yeah, so that would also be a resource to look into, because I do know that they have been offering online support groups, classes, enrichment classes, all those kinds of things. So, okay. Thank you to, let's see. Oh, Christian is saying right now they can't travel from outside the US. Absolutely. So that does put a restriction on the international community. Absolutely. Yes. So thank you to parents who participated. Do know that if you have additional questions or wanting to gain more resources or support, you can check out our private Facebook group, Mom Squad. That's a community of parents who have kids and teens with learning and attention challenges. I also post a lot of guides, so resources related to specific learning disabilities and learning and attention challenges like auditory processing, executive function, dyslexia. Again, you can find it on our Facebook page or by going to Facebook groups and searching the keyword SLC Mom Squad. And we also posted the link in the comment section. And then another resource for you is our monthly support group, Peace. Every month we come together virtually and we discuss challenges related to learning, different topics. We go through Jill's book and how she explains all those underlying learning skills that can be impacting your child's performance in school and functioning and peace in your house. Our next meeting is Thursday, June 17th at 5 p.m. Pacific time, and we're going to be talking about processing skills. Our last month's meeting was on auditory processing, and I know a lot of you have some follow-up questions, and so bring them to that meeting. You do need to register to participate in the meetings, so go to stowellcenter.com/peace to get the registration link. Thank you to everyone for your questions and comments today. This is a very hot topic. We have a lot of parents with twice exceptional kiddos that for a long time felt really alone. So thank you, Dr. Dan, for being a resource.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lauren. And truly, thank you everyone for tuning in today and joining the conversation. This is LD Expert Live. I'm Jill Stowell here with psychologist Dr. Dan Peters. Before we wrap up, Dr. Dan, I would love for you to tell us about your podcast, The Parent Footprint. We've been talking about this need to just educate people about our kids. And I know that you do that through this podcast. So can you just tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so this is just such a fun endeavor. Doing what you do, being on the other side of this, is getting to interview people, authors, consultants, people, influencers, people who have something to share about being human, about being a parent. And the premise of the show is to create awareness with the idea that with increased awareness with us as parents of who we are, where we came from, and what we want for our kids, we can be purposeful about leaving a healthy footprint on our kids. So it's about being aware individuals, aware humans, and really the idea of being engaged as parents in our own lives as ways to also model for our kids how to be. Because a lot of us who have kids who are special needs and also are just really into parenting, we spend a lot of time on our kids. And what we need to also do is take a step back and remember how much we matter and how much us being healthy and engaged produces healthy kids who want to be engaged in life like us.
Wow. Thank you so much. And thank you for taking the time to share your expertise. This has been fantastic.
Thanks, Jill. I really had a good time.
Here is the contact information for Dr. Dan and Summit Center. Be sure to check out their website and the Parent Footprint podcast. You will find it full of thoughtful and practical support for you. So listen wherever you get your podcasts. This is LD Expert Live, your place for answers and solutions for learning differences, dyslexia, and attention challenges. We're live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific. Next Tuesday, Dr. 𝗟𝗲𝗿, Director of the Program for Anxiety Disorders at the Yale University Child Study Center, will share compassionate, workable tools to reduce childhood anxiety and OCD. Really important topic. Be sure to join us next Tuesday at 10. Stowell Learning Centers are open for remote sessions and screenings. We're also seeing students on site with all of the COVID precautions. We work with bright but struggling children and adults doing targeted brain training to permanently change dyslexia, attention, auditory processing, and other learning challenges. If you would like a free consultation for yourself or your child, give us a call or visit our website at stowellcenter.com. Thank you again, Dr. Dan. Thank you, all of you who have been sharing, subscribing, and joining us each week. We love connecting with you. If you're finding these broadcasts helpful, please share. There are so many parents out there just dying for support. We'll see you next Tuesday.